and welcome to the second episode of Power Dynamics for Life. My name is Dr. Aisha Haynes-Belizaire, and I am an educator, strategist, and empowerment leader. Now, our topic for today is threats of World War III, Russia's power play, and miscalculation. Now, as an American, you may be asking yourself, what does this have to do with me? Why is this my problem? Don't we have our own problems? We have skyrocketing inflation. The grocery store is ridiculous. The gas pump is even more ridiculous. We have us just coming up out of COVID. We have our own political divisions here at home in America. So why do I care? This is why you need to care. Russia has over 6,000 nuclear weapons, more than any other country in the entire world. The U.S. has over 5,000 nuclear weapons. Russia has tremendous technological cyber capabilities, as well as they are a major oil and gas exporter and a former superpower. So to put this all into context, I'd like you to come along with me as we go on a brief history lesson. It is estimated that as a result of World War II, over 75 million people died worldwide. The world came together and said, we can never have something like this again. If we have World War III, we're not going to even have a world. So they established the United Nations. And the United Nations was designed as an organization to make sure that there would be peacekeeping in the world and try to resolve conflicts through diplomatic measures. At the same time, realizing that there are bullies in the world, there also were defense alliances formed. Now, when you think about a defense alliance, what is that? Now, think back to when you were in school. And if you've ever had a bully or were a bully or knew of a bully, what do bullies do? They pick on people who are smaller than them, and they always try to catch their victims when they're by themselves. So what you ended up doing was getting your backup. You got your defense alliance. You got your cousins, you got your friends, and you made sure that you didn't walk home from school by yourself and you were never alone. The same thing with the defense alliance. So you had two major defense alliances emerging after World War II. On the Western side, you had the United States, Canada, and Western Europe, and that was NATO. On the Eastern side, you had the Russian-headed Soviet Union and the Eastern European countries, and that was the Warsaw Pact. And so the world was divided between East and West. Also, to go along with these divisions were two different types of political and economic ideologies. On the Western side, you have democracy, capitalism, and individualism. On the Eastern side, you have communist socialists, authoritarian / dictatorship, along with collectivism. And so these were the two ideologies, East and West, and you have the United States and the Soviet Union as the two superpowers, and this is the beginning of the Cold War and the arms race. Why do we call it a Cold War? It's called a Cold War is because the United States and the Soviet Union knew that if there was ever any kind of direct conflict, that would be total a nuclear annihilation. So they fought wars, surrogate wars, through either arming other countries or being in combat in other countries against these two ideologies. So example of that would be the Vietnam War, the Korean War, the Cuban Missile Crisis. Also, that the people that grew up under the Cold War era, and I am, old enough to remember being under the Cold War era, we had this fear seared into the back of our minds of nuclear annihilation. There are three cultural references that I remember as a teenager in the 1980s. The first one was the movie The Day After. And the movie of the Day After was watched by millions of households in the United States. And one of the things I remember was after that nuclear bomb hit, it just annihilated. Just evaporated. People evaporated. They were walking down the street and then they weren't walking down the street no more. It was like zip and they were gone. And then all of the buildings were just smashed to smithereens. Cars were melted down. And this was very traumatic. I remember talking about it in school. I remember teachers having us write essays on it. And so what this did was show the world that, you know what, we need to do something about these nuclear arms because we not going to make it. You know, we've got enough bombs to blow up the world 100 times over. The second cultural reference I remember was the nuclear accident at the Chernobyl nuclear plant that is in Ukraine, and it was part of the Soviet Union at the time. When the nuclear Chernobyl plant had the meltdown, and that nuclear radiation got into the atmosphere, we found out that once something gets into the atmosphere, it doesn't stay right there. It moves with the winds. And so for miles around Chernobyl, the soil was poisoned, animals were poisoned, people were poisoned, people died immediately, people died 10, 20, 30 years later from having cancer from that. Animals had deformities, women had babies that had deformities, all kinds of just really negative, nasty things. And so that scared the world. And then the next thing that I remember as a cultural reference was Prince's song 1999. Now, it actually came out in the early 1980s, but Prince was saying, everybody's got a bomb and we gonna all just die. So you know what? Let's just party like it's 1999. And that was the mentality of a lot of me and my friends at that time, because we just kind of felt like as teenagers, we don't even know if we're gonna make it to 2000. We don't even know if we're gonna make it to 1990. So we might as well have a good time and party like it's 1999. So that fear of nuclear annihilation was always seared into our minds. So as we go fast forward, we get to 1989, and we begin to see the beginning of the fall of the Eastern Bloc in the Soviet Union. And when you have these type of governments, dictatorship, authoritarian, communist type of governments, in some ways people will look at, you know, some of the good things about, you know, you have healthcare for everybody, you have education for everybody, everybody's basic needs are met. However, in order for those forms of government to work, you have to have everybody walk in lockstep. You cannot have any individual thought, any self-determination. You have to do what the government tells you to do. There's no freedom of movement. Oftentimes, you can't even worship the way you want to. And when those kind of personal basic desires of a human beings is being pushed down, repressed, the people are trying to rise up and be able to have some type of self-determination. And so as the government is pushing down, that is political repression as the people are trying to rise up. I call it the political beatdown. Why do I call it the political beatdown? Is because first, you are being assaulted, oftentimes by secret police that the government has, or you were being jailed, or you are being killed, or you were being disappeared. What does it mean to be disappeared? That means that you might be sent off to a work camp somewhere, you might be tortured, sent somewhere and tortured, or you might just be chopped up and your body thrown to the winds. Either way, your family is never to see you again, your friends are never to see you again, and nobody knows exactly what happened to you. So these were the things that were happening. So in 1999, one of the most visible, 1989, one of the most visible symbols of the Cold War era was the Berlin Wall. And you'll often hear about behind the Iron Curtain when people refer to the Soviet Union and the Eastern European countries. And that was a line that went up and down Europe that divided East and West. But the Berlin Wall itself was the most visible symbol. And the Berlin Wall came down in 1989, and the Soviet Union fell in 1991. And all of these Eastern European countries, they started to gain their independence and fight for independence. And some of them even joined NATO. Okay, so after you have the fall of the Soviet Union, you then have the problem of loose nukes in the world. And that is that Ukraine, they were a former Soviet state, and they had, at the end of the Cold War, the third largest stockpiles of nuclear weapons in the world. And so the world came together and said to Ukraine, look, if you give back your nuclear weapons to Russia and you give them up, we will guarantee you that Russia will never invade you and that you will have your territory, the integrity of your territory of your country, and you will not be invaded. And this was called the Budapest Agreement. So Ukraine gives back their nuclear weapons. So now fast forward to 2000. In 2000, Vladimir Putin is elected as president to Russia. And, you know, everybody is looking for a new Russia. The Soviet days are over. The Cold War days are over. And Putin makes everybody think that, you know, he's going to be a new type of leader and that, you know, he's going to open up society more. He's going to fight corruption. He's going to be a new type of leader. But no, he's not. What he really wants is to bring back the former Soviet Union. He wants to be a superpower again. He wants the glory days of the Russian Empire. So what does he do? He goes after former Soviet states. First, in 2008, he invades Georgia. And in 2014, he annexes Crimea, which is part of Ukraine. And now, in 2022, he has invaded Ukraine, but he has miscalculated this time. The world has been shocked at the unprovoked attacks that Russia has on Ukraine. They have targeted civilian populations, women in children's hospitals, nuclear power plants. Dude, what is wrong with you? Those are war crimes. The world has reacted with unprecedented sanctions. They have sanctions on banking. They have sanctions on oil and gas. They have sanctions on business, on trade. Now Russia is an international pariah. There has been diplomatic rebuke. As the world comes together to try to help Ukraine with defensive weapons and humanitarian aid, we are witnessing Putin not wanting to stop at anything. He is just being relentless. Now, what we have to understand is that these are serious times and we need serious leaders. You may hear people out here talking about, we need to have a no-fly zone. You know what that means? A no-fly zone would require that if the United States or NATO was to establish a no-fly zone, that if a Russian pilot went through and a Russian plane went through the no-fly zone, then that means that it would need to be shot down, and that would draw the United States into World War III. That is what Putin wants. Also, if any NATO nation is attacked, an attack on one NATO nation is an attack on all NATO nations, and that also would be dragging the United States into World War III. Again, what Putin wants. And so I hope I was able to answer any looming questions that you may have in regards to what you have been seeing in your news feeds over the last couple of weeks. Thank you for spending some time with us today here at Power Dynamics for Life. We are a new channel, so I am asking you to comment, like, share, subscribe, so we can get this information out to the greater community. I'm Dr. Aisha Haynes-Belizaire, and I look forward to seeing you very, very soon in our upcoming episodes. Thank you for joining me today, and have a blessed day. Bye-bye.